striking party close ties to Hindu nationalism?
सेवक से लेकर देश के प्रधान सेवक बनने तक मोदी की इस यात्रा में जाने कितने बार कितने मुकाम आए कितनी मुश्किलें आई लेकिन सबके बीच आरएसएस के लीडरों का बिल्कुल खड़े होकर जो मैंने गुजरात में किया
Against minority communities that have happened in India, you will see the imprint of the RSS.
A family of 10 people assaulted, looted, and abused. Millions were in Indian state of Assam and now their names are missing in the national registry. And this is published by the government will identify
Muslims say the law is part of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's neo-nationalist agenda to marginalize the Islamic community in the country. Muslims are not the only opponents of the law.
Protesting against the bill which the government has passed, which is discriminating for one particular community. It's against the Muslims. It's against the equal of India. It's against the secular ideas of
India on Thursday reiterated its position on the ongoing border dispute with Nepal.
That really made us feel bad that India
something unilaterally that created the situation that we are in.
Indian authorities have repeatedly promised to bring a number of foreign trade down to zero and to introduce non-lethal weapons. But it's clearly not happening.
Going back to India, where we came to India, and we're operating from India.
हमने इनकी जो एक नजर है जो उस वक्त बाहर की तरह है उसे हमने घुमा के अंदर इंटरनल उनको अंदर अपनी जो मुल्क के हालात है वहाँ पे करवा दी और ये तभी होगा जब हम उनको उनका खून बहाएंगे कि एसिमेट्रिक मीन्स दैट इज व्हाट इज रिक्वायर्ड एज पार्ट ऑफ द स्ट्रेस
I have commanded the mission in Shibli number 41550 of the Indian Navy. I am commissioned officer in the Indian Navy. My purpose of this visit to Pakistan was to establish and meet the basic leadership of Baluch subnationals, the behavior of the BRA, and establish and infiltrate around 30 to 40 raw operatives along the Makaram coast for operations along with Baluch subnationals and miscreants or terrorists. It was a discreet, non-embassy-based operation, exclusively meant to conduct meetings with Baluch insurgents and terrorists. The aim of these meetings was always to see that the aims and the targets of law to conduct the various terrorist activities in Balochistan are conveyed properly to the insurgents, and any kinds of requirements of them are conveyed back to the law officials. Research analysis is going through Mr. Anil Kumar has been financing and sponsoring a lot of activities within Balochistan and Sindh. The entire Indian Hawala operations are undertaken from Delhi and Mumbai via Dubai into Pakistan, so that instability or some kind of fear is set into the mindsets of the people of Pakistan.
Foreign policy experts argue that the brewing conflict between the two nuclear armed nations is not an isolated event.
ये बहुत जरूरी है कि यहाँ थोड़ी सी ताकत पर हिकमत इस्तेमाल मेरा सवाल है कि क्या जो हथियार आपके पास है हमारे पास क्या हम मिस कैलकुलेशन अफोर्ड कर सकते हैं क्या हमें इस बात सोचना नहीं चाहिए कि ये अगर यहाँ से एस्केलेट होती है ये किधर जाएगी ना मेरे कंट्रोल में होगी ना नरेंद्र मोदी के कंट्रोल में इसलिए मैं फिर से आपको बताऊंगी कि तो हम तैयार रहें किसी किस्म का डायलॉग करना चाहिए दहशतगर्दी को हम तैयार लेकिन मैं फिर से आपको कहूँगा कि इस बार बेटर सेंशन हो गई हमें बैठ के बातचीत से हमें सिद्धांत करना चाहिए
Maybe it's a classic. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to request Secretary Information and Broadcasting, Mr. Akbar Durrani, to please come up on stage and share his welcoming remarks. Mr. Akbar Durrani.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Sadaqallahu al-azim. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you all for your participation and showing interest in today's panel discussion, Decoding Indian Foreign Policy in the Regional and Global Context. It gives me immense pleasure to present another edition of Pakistan Information Services of events to create awareness and sensitize audience on important issues, challenges of our country, encounters on national security and external affairs fronts. Today's session will help us to assess the current situation both in regional and global context emerging out of the Indian provocative, inciting and aggressive foreign policy under RSS-led government. India's Hindutva mindset has made the lives of millions of Indian minorities hell, which has caused them to live in miserable and pathetic life. Lynching, killing and humiliation of the Muslims in public places by RSS and Hindu extremist goons has become routine and considered normal in the Indian society. This has exposed India's naked propagation of being the world's largest democracy. In fact, now the world recognizes India as Hindu Rashtra. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan believes in peaceful coexistence with all its neighbors countries. Pakistan is one of the greatest contributors for peace missions working for the regional as well as global harmony. The world is acknowledging and appreciating Pakistan's positive role in Afghanistan peacekeeping process. This is a clear manifestation of its commitment to a stable and peaceful Afghanistan. But India is playing as spoiler and trying its best to sabotage the peaceful settlement of Afghan conglomerate. As you have watched in the documentary, Commander Kulbhushan Yadav, serving for Indian Navy, was arrested red-handed, confessed that he was working for RAW to destabilize Pakistan by unleashing terror through his terrorist network. Commander Kulbhushan Yadav is true face of India. His arrest is an undeniable proof of Indian strategy of using terror as an instrument for furthering their foreign policy agenda. Indian guided and supported terror act on Pakistan Stock Exchange in Karachi is an example of Indian dangerous designs to push the region and beyond into war. It was very interesting to note that most of the Indian journalists were jubilant and excited. They were running live commentaries on social and mainstreaming media with a common narrative providing them by their masters. We are also aware of the fact that RSS-led Modi government is importing like-minded Indian journalists from Delhi in the Indian illegal occupied Jammu and Kashmir for supplying oxygen to the Indian propaganda machinery. These Indian journalists are embedded with the Indian security forces and toured in their armed vehicles for spreading lies and distorting the factual position of IIJK, which is under Indian military siege and subjugation. The nexus and connivance of Indian media with this establishment is promoting and exporting terrorism in the region and beyond is a classical example of fifth generation warfare tactics, disinformation and propaganda. Unfortunately, Pakistan is the prime victim and target of Indians' systematic and planned fifth generation war, which is run globally through a web of fake and dubious media networks. Instead of addressing outstanding issues of Jammu and Kashmir as per UN Security Council resolution and settle other bilateral issues like Siachen and Sarkri through dialogues, India is playing dangerous game by its chauvinistic and hegemonic policy by flouting Indus Water Treaty, Shimla Agreement and Ceasefire Agreement of 2003 between the two countries. Therefore, now the time has come that the world should notice irresponsible and aggressive posturing of India causing instability and threat to peaceful coexistence at the regional and global context. Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to share that today's panel consists of seasoned, informed and globally recognized diplomats of Pakistan. We are lucky to have experts who have real understanding and insight of the topic under discussion. The distinguished speakers have served in Pakistan High Commission at New Delhi and represented Pakistan in the important world capitals. They have been closely watching and observing Indian foreign policy making process, its implementation and implication for regional and global peace. I am sure that you will find today's interactive session insightful, interesting, informative and educative. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. One announcement that our minister will be joining us soon, and I'm also thankful to my colleagues who have joined in video link from other countries. They are there. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen.
Sir, thank you very much for your opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, today's panel is composed of the stalwarts of Foreign Service of Pakistan. As the Secretary, Ministry of Information has rightly said that they are seasoned, informed, and they are institutions themselves. So, first of all, I would like to invite our first panelist. Please warmly welcome His Excellency Ambassador Riaz Hussain Khokhar on the stage. Please, sir. His Excellency Ambassador Riaz Hussain Khokhar has been the former Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, former High Commissioner of Pakistan to India, and he has been the former Ambassador of Pakistan to USA, Bangladesh and China. Now the next panelist, please welcome His Excellency Ambassador Salman Bashir. Ambassador Salman Bashir has been the former Foreign Secretary of Pakistan. He has been the former High Commissioner of Pakistan to India. He has been the former Ambassador of Pakistan to China, Mongolia, Denmark and Lithuania. Now I invite, please welcome His Excellency Ambassador Aziz Ahmad Khan. His Excellency Ambassador Aziz Ahmad Khan has been the former High Commissioner of Pakistan to India and Bangladesh, and he has also been the former Ambassador of Pakistan to Afghanistan. Now finally, I request and invite, please welcome His Excellency Ambassador Asif Durrani. His Excellency Ambassador Asif Durrani has been the former Ambassador of Pakistan to Iran and UAE, and he has also served in New Delhi, Kabul, London and New York. Ladies and gentlemen, before we open the discussion of today's panel discussion, let me brief you about the format of today's panel discussion. Each worthy speaker has 10 minutes to speak and discuss the topic of today. And then after the completion of an individual round, we would be requesting the participants and we will be opening the floor for Q&A, and the duration of a Q&A is 30 minutes. So let me open the discussion by inviting and requesting His Excellency Ambassador Riaz Hussain Khokhar. Sir, the floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your warm welcome. This is a very interesting topic. I was struck by the word decoding, but my view is that India's foreign policy is very transparent, as as clear as in the daylight. What you have mentioned and what we've seen on the screen is probably the worst of India's foreign policy. And probably much worse is in store. I think we should be very clear about that. Historically speaking, India's foreign policy, the foundations were laid by Jawaharlal Nehru. Let's have no misunderstanding. All Indian leaders, starting from Mahatma Gandhi, now to Prime Minister Modi, they have always had basic objectives in mind. Number one, India will be the hegemonic power in South Asia. Since we're talking about South Asia, India will dominate South Asia. Number two, India will be a great power. So these two were the driving forces. Pakistan happened to be one of the major obstacles in this dream. Now, what has happened? When I say that the objectives are the same, if you see that from the time of Nehru up till now, what is different is the substance is the same, but form, style, and virulence has differed. Today you see the most virulent. We've had wars with India, 48, 65 January, and then 65 September, then 71. Right from the word go, India has always been wanting to weaken Pakistan. And of course, to disintegrate Pakistan. And of course, what else is in store, I cannot predict. But we have to be ready for the good and the bad. So this is basically what I wanted to say in regard to the historical aspect. All our wars were during Congress time. All our agreements, major agreements, were also during the time of Congress. And in 71, there were strategists in India who thought that perhaps Mrs. Gandhi has been a bit soft on Pakistan and she has missed an opportunity of the century to destroy Pakistan, destroy Pakistan's army. I mean, that destruction of Pakistan army was one of the major objectives. Of course, 98, the nuclear experiments on both sides changed the strategic scene for India and Pakistan. Now what you see about Prime Minister Modi's policies. He is a person who has come up through the RSS. And RSS is one of the most vicious organizations in India. It's political, religious, and also virulently anti-Pakistan, virulently anti-Muslim, virulently they have no regard and respect for either the Sikh community or the Christians. So today, what you see is a new ideological thrust. Previously, the ideological thrust was not there, but now it is there. Basically, Mr. Modi wants to transform India into a real Hindu state. That's his main ambition. In fact, this is the ambition of the RSS, the VHP, the Bajrang Dal, all these righteous organizations. They want to cleanse India of what they consider as elements that have crept into the Hindu society. Basically, Hindutva is actually, it covers it's a very vague term, but it's kind of cultural nationalism, which is actually a euphemism for religious and political bigotry. So, as far as Modi is concerned, this is basically what he's embarked on. Now, what he's done, I regret to tell you, is something that is popular in India. Please do not forget that 83% of India's population is Hindu. And whatever little resistance that we have seen, either in the media or in the in the civil society, some sort of muted voices from the political parties, by and large, whatever he has done in India so far in regard to Kashmir, in regard to what he's doing to the minorities in India. So that's basically, now unfortunately, because of the grim international realities, you know, the world, the global order is in a state of flux. And in that context, India has gained a lot of importance in the eyes of the big major powers, particularly the United States. India is a big country. It's 7 times the size of Pakistan. It has an economy and a developing economy. Of course, it's in trouble at the moment. But by and large, a large country, 3rd largest army in the world, 4th largest air force in the world, 5th largest navy in the world, nuclear power, and a large technological and industrial base. So we are faced with a major challenge vis-a-vis India. What India has done in Kashmir is very obvious, most ruthless killing machine. They are indulging in a very systematic genocide, and I think I would say that we have to compliment the brave people of Kashmir for whatever they have withstood so far. Over the years, they've lost over 100,000 people. Every family in Kashmir has suffered. But I want to touch on one other aspect. India has been able to win support in the international community among the major powers, and I can even name them: USA, Britain, France. Russia is at the moment a little nebulous in its attitude. And then, of course, other Western countries. Why is that? Well, it's because India is a big country. India is economically very attractive for the world. And today's world, what matters is the size of your economy and what you can do for the future of the economy. And, of course, the most critical factor today is the complicated relationship between the US and China, and how and what role can India play in this game. Clearly, the United States would like to harness, or has harnessed, India for the containment of China. And you can see that there is a lot of conflict in the region. And one more thing I wanted to add here is, I hope I'm within my time. One more thing I wanted to add is, we have been very consistent about our policy on Kashmir. But I'll be very frank. Statements, speeches, and repeating them by and large over and over again is not going to get the Kashmiris their freedom from India. We have to understand that very clearly. I am I'm a minority view in this country. We have to help the Kashmiris. We have no choice, we have no option. They have already sacrificed a lot, and we have a certain responsibility. As you know, under the UN Charter, there are elements within the UN Charter which allow and permit that we can support people who are fighting for their freedom. Freedom. And here freedom means the right of self-determination, which has been guaranteed to them not only by India, by the international community, and of course, the world knows about it. The UN resolutions are critical as far as Pakistan is concerned, as far as the Kashmiris are concerned, because we were made parties to this dispute by the UN resolutions. And those who sort of ridicule the UN resolutions or say that they are dated or they are no longer relevant, like some leaders in the past have said, I think they need to be condemned. The Kashmiris have suffered a lot, and as I mentioned earlier, we have a responsibility to them. And when you make statements that yes, of course, everybody, we want peace, and the record shows that Pakistan has been, and in fact, even begging for peace in the past. So India has made up its mind. India is very clear about its priorities. No compromise with Pakistan. No concessions to Pakistan. No way are we going to give up Kashmir. This, by the way, is what you call a national consensus in India. And even if it means killing the last Kashmiri, they would not hesitate. That's the attitude, that's the mindset, and particularly of the government that is in power today. So we have a very complicated situation. India is a big country, but it's not a great country, because it's an elephant with a very mean mind and a very small heart. And that's one of the reasons why it really cannot be a great country. India can only be a great country if countries in the region accept them. Today, they have problems with everybody. Nepal, it's a Hindu state, has been strangulated on a number of occasions by these economic clampdown on Nepal, 4 or 5 times. 3 times during the time of the Congress, twice by Modi's government. Bhutan really cannot breathe. I was also ambassador to Bhutan. I can tell you they are very nice people. They have a lot of affection for Pakistan, but they can't breathe. Sri Lanka has had very bad experience with India. The Tamil, the LTD, who created it? It was India that created it, a man called Prabhakaran. And then, of course, they even intervened, as you know, and got a very bloody nose. And eventually, Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated. So India has a very complicated foreign policy. There was I can give you a little story. There was a very affectionate mother who was watching the passing out parade of the school where her son was studying. And in the passing out parade, her son was 1 or 2 steps behind the line. So she said, asked the principal, why is everybody else out of line with my son? I think that is the situation with India. India thinks that everybody is out of line. But domination, hegemony, domination of the Indian Ocean has become a major, major foreign policy interest of India. And then how to do it? Now, of course, they've had this issue with China, which is a very complicated issue. India got beaten in 1962. They probably got a bloody nose now, and probably get a bigger bloody nose if they were to really take on China. So the question I'm trying to say is, but they are now trying to, you see, India's had this whole thing about non-alignment. There's no such thing as non-alignment, and they have used it to their advantage. When they need the support of a major power, they go to them. Like in '71, India signed the Indo-Soviet Treaty to decimate Pakistan. Now they are trying to get into bed with the United States. So, you know, This is the opportunistic aspect of India's foreign policy. For us, there are 3 or 4 important things now. Kashmir remains a very critical problem for Pakistan. And how do we manage it? Number one. Number two, how do we manage our relations with India, with a country which is extremely aggressive? And thirdly, and very importantly, how do we protect CPEC? Because India has convinced the United States that CPEC is not only a threat to India, but it is a threat to the United States. And now Western countries are now openly saying this, that CPEC is a threat to vital national security interests of Western countries. So let me just sum it up by saying that we are facing some very critical challenges, but a very important aspect which I've sort of missed earlier. In India, there is a consensus. No national political party is saying that settle with Pakistan, or give up Kashmir, or compromise on Kashmir. In Pakistan, there is some confusion. What I would like to underline here is that it is absolutely imperative that all political parties must be on the same page, not the front and the back of the page, but on the front of the page. And on this issue and other national issues, there should be no compromises. So what we have seen of the last few months, the debate on Kashmir in the parliament, I'm sorry to say, was a bit of a disgrace. It took them a day and a half or 2 to pass a resolution on Kashmir, something that should have happened in 5 minutes. Because these resolutions are not drafted by these parliamentarians. They are already, as they say, ready and cooked and presented before the parliamentarians. They just have to agree on it. And it should have been unanimously passed in the first 10 minutes. So what I'm trying to say is that there is a certain, and India is taking advantage of this thing. They are aware of the internal political difficulties that Pakistan is facing. And therefore, we must make every effort to ensure that we do not provide India opportunities, whether it's in Balochistan or in Fatah or elsewhere. This is what they are capitalizing on. They say it openly. I'm not making any great revelations. They're saying it openly. They write openly about it, that we are out to destroy Pakistan. We are out to destabilize Pakistan. So my final comment is that I really would appeal to the nation, to the Prime Minister, who has great responsibility to ensure that this consensus in this country on critical national issues, in which I include, of course, the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, is something on which there is a national consensus. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Khokhar, for your insightful comments. I would now like to request Ambassador His Excellency Aziz Khan to please come forward and share his views with us. Ambassador Aziz Khan.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you to Secretary of Information and his team for organizing this important seminar and giving us the opportunity to discuss a subject which is of topical but most primary interest for Pakistan. After a comprehensive analysis of the issue by Ambassador Riaz Khokhar, there's really, you will forgive me if these encounters have the repetitions, because he has really very comprehensively and exhaustively covered the subject. The topic of decoding Indian foreign policy. Now, in a manner of speaking, yes, India's foreign policy is very clear and cut out, particularly as far as Pakistan is concerned. Nonetheless, there is a certain degree of decoding, because normally a country's foreign policy is a policy which tries to protect the country's national security, promotes country's interest by having friendly relations with other nations, and promote the socio-economic agenda of that country. And these are the elements which comprise any country's foreign policy. As far as India is concerned, and I hope you won't consider my remark a bit facetious, but in India's making of India's foreign policy, there is also a little element of mythology and a little element of Bollywood that enters in their expression of their designs. As you see, the hyperbole that they use, and particularly particular government. So the decoding part really comes there. Okay, now that they are saying this, what do they mean by that? Because now they are, and with this particular government in particular, the whole thing is becoming a little more mysterious, because their claim, for example, that plastic surgery was invented during the Vedic times, or that during Vedic times the Indians had flying machines and so on, and used to fly from one place to the other. So this is the mindset that the new Indian foreign policy makers are injecting into their narrative. But nonetheless, the consistent factor of Indian foreign policy has been enmity with Pakistan. That the shade may have been different, the language may have been different from the suave words of Prime Minister Nehru or Mahatma Gandhi to a little more aggressive style of Indira Gandhi to outright threatening style of the present level. But as far as Pakistan is concerned, it has been a thing that they would not accept easily. They are still smarting, and they want to do something to which they can put Pakistan to harm. We have seen the attempts that they have been making, and we have seen how they have tried to do that right from the beginning. To start, I mean, it will be, everybody is familiar with the history, so maybe one doesn't have to go into the details, but right from the time when they took the Kashmir dispute to the United Nations, agreed to implement those resolutions. Prime Minister Nehru wrote to Pakistani leaders right from Rabat Ali Khanda on that yes, they will hold a plebiscite. And then suddenly they pass a resolution in the parliament and say that there is no Kashmir, the entire Kashmir is Pakistan. India's, because we have our parliament has passed resolution. The issue is on the United Nations agenda. It is on the agenda of the Security Council. Every year they try to get it removed, but they are not successful, and yet they blatantly continue to say what that it is a food arm of India. And these are unfortunately here the problem has been that the international community has also not acted on principles and have gradually conceded to India's point of view, in the sense that they speak less and less about it. As Khokhar pointed out, it was the main reason for that is that the size of India and the size of their economy, particularly in the last 2 or 3 decades, that their economy has expanded, and so the world thinks there is a market for their products, and as such they try to model India. But the fact is that still there is hope that Pakistan should be able to be consistent in our narrative, and as far as the question of final settlement of Kashmir is concerned. Here, the Indian government, this particular government, in their RSS ideology, and all, they have been a little aggressive, and as such, they have done certain things with which they will ultimately are going to come to harm. I mean, it might be just a fantasy or a hope from, that I'm thinking of, but the fact of the matter is that they have, despite the good majority that they have, and initially the overwhelming support that they had, they have taken steps by which their lot is going to be damaged. ultimately. But number one was the demonetization policy that they put in, which really harmed the Indian economy and particularly harmed the poor people and the smaller business enterprises. Second was the 5th August action that they took in Kashmir, which was brutal and which has been recognized by the entire world as a brutal action. Maybe somewhere it has not been as vocal, some countries have not been as vocal as they should have been, but the fact remains that it has been taken notice of. The UN Secretary has talked about it, the UN Human Rights Organization has talked about it, and there are other international human rights organizations that have been talking about it. And the third mistake that they made was more recent during the COVID time, when they started that brutal lockdown, which they thought that would prevent the spread of the disease, but it became the reason of the spread of the disease. And today, India is the world's second largest COVID-affected country after the United States. These factors, I think, are ultimately going to, personally, I think they give hope, a reason for hope that this fanatic government that is in India at least will come to harm. And even if the past Indian government before the BJP, this particular version of BJP was not friendly towards Pakistan, at least it was not as blatantly inimical towards Pakistan as this government is. Another blunder that they have made is the recent standoff with China. Now, I am not a Chinese expert. These two ambassadors who have served there, and they will probably be able to throw more light on that. But I personally feel that India was surreptitiously trying to do in Hussain what they had done in Siachen, in Pakistan. And India got wise to that. And they realized that there is something in this because they were upgrading the road, they were upgrading the airfield, and China took action in time to prevent that. And that is what India is smarting from. And that they have, and all their sensible analysts are saying that India has suffered a setback there. I don't think that this will flare up into something very serious, because Chinese are wise people and they will still try to keep the situation under control, and that will bring India down from the high horse that they have been sitting on. Now, as far as specifically with Pakistan is concerned, our issue with India is the Kashmir issue. That is the core of the problem. That is what we have been claiming right from the beginning. But if you look back at the recent history of Pakistan and India dialogue procedures, we gave into India's suggestion that let's have a whole range of issues to discuss them rather than just Kashmir specifically, because their complaint used to be that Pakistan just wants to discuss Kashmir and nothing else. So we had first during the Arab time the 4-point program in which we started tackling some other trade and other issues with India, Siachen and Sirki. Then we expanded it to the 8-point composite dialogue process. That has not yielded much results. And now what India has done is itself made it clear that the only issue between India and Pakistan is Kashmir issue. They have flouted the UN resolutions earlier also and now also. Then they used to keep talking about the Simla agreement. Now they have flouted the Simla agreement as well, because the Simla agreement recognizes the Kashmir dispute and asks that neither side will change the situation on the ground. India has changed the situation on the ground. The Kashmir issue is the only issue now and not to be discussed, even if it is discussed bilaterally, but it is something that India themselves have flouted. Pakistan, obviously there is no solution to the dispute except through peaceful means and peaceful negotiations, because for any dispute, the solution is only through negotiations and dialogue. And in this, we have to give full support to the Kashmiris, because today the situation is that the entire Kashmir population, all the Muslims in Kashmir, are totally against this particular government. In fact, even the pro-Kashmir, the so-called pro-government Indian government parties, even they have issued a statement condemning the actions of this particular government. After my retirement, I had an opportunity, two opportunities, once to visit Srinagar and once to visit Jammu. And every person that you talk to on one-on-one would tell you that they don't like the Indian rule and they would like to be free. They talk about Azadi. And by Azadi, they do not mean, by and large, they do not mean the independent sovereign country, but by that they mean the right to self-determination. And I think, as Riaz very rightly pointed it out, if India wants to have what they wish to do in Kashmir, is they will have to kill each and every Kashmiri before they can achieve that objective. Because that is for sure. Pakistan has to support them. We have to support them, and there are several ways that we can do. But present circumstances, the opportunity is through human rights organizations. The human rights violations have been recognized throughout the world. Every country is talking about it. And our approach now, apart from the original fact of self-determination, is to highlight the human rights violations. This can be done through several means. Diplomatic missions and government agencies are doing their job. They are continue to teach the governments of what is happening in Kashmir. But at the same time, I think, number one, the parliament, key representatives, particularly women representatives in parliament, who are articulate and who know the subject, should be sent to Western European countries, UK and US, to talk to their counterparts and highlight this. There are lots of parliamentarians in this parliament who are mindful of the atrocities in Kashmir. We have to keep a relentless effort to continuously, not just one round and finish, but continuously. Number two is through the media. Media can play a very important role, and particularly through social media. Our media is a vibrant, strong media. They have connections with the media houses in the rest of the world, and they should, through their contacts, influence that these areas are highlighted. Similarly, it is through the civil society organizations. Today, civil society organizations play a very important role, and they should get in touch with their counterparts all over the world to highlight this issue. Number four, the Kashmiri diaspora, particularly in Western Europe, UK and the United States. Kashmiri diaspora is very well placed and is very strong, and they should be given help. And finally, the Kashmiris inside. We need to help them through diplomatically, politically, and through the Kashmiri diaspora, perhaps give them some kind of support and sustenance to overcome the privations they are suffering, the loss of jobs that they are suffering, and the atrocities they are suffering. It will be a difficult task, it will be difficult to achieve, but we have to keep at it relentlessly. It may take a little longer. And if India offers talks on Kashmir, we should accept the talks, their offer of talks, but tell them that the agenda is going to be the only discussion on Kashmir, and that also under the UN resolutions. Because you have yourself finished the civil agreement with the bilateral aspect, and now there's only one aspect left, because the issue still is on the agenda of the Security Council, and we should just insist on that. And finally, looking at India's example, why the world is supporting them is because of their economic growth. We need to pay attention to the conditions of our internal situation, our economy, and try to do something about it. And do a little less politics. I mean, it's very nice to keep abusing each other in the parliamentary inter-party debate that we have on television, but that is again, I don't want to be disrespectful, but that's an utter waste of time. And it is just makes us just a laughing stock in the rest of the world. We need to be united on this issue, and we need to be focused on this issue. I think it may take long, but we have to be persistent on that, and the the real hope is that the Kashmiri will not support India's will. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Khan, for your valuable comments. We now proceed to Ambassador His Excellency Asif Durrani for his perspective on the topic. Ambassador Asif Durrani.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Secretary, it's an honor to be here second time, and especially in the presence of my mentors, Ambassador Riaz Khokhar, Ambassador Salman Bashir, and Ambassador Aziz Ahmad Khan. What I would say would, in fact, would just be showing my only way what I have learned through these seniors. And there might be repetitions, please bear with me. When we talk about decoding, I think we should have replaced this word with dissecting Indian foreign policy in regional and global perspective. So that would have done the justice with the topic. Indian foreign policy, in my view, has evolved over the decades, from Nehruvian romanticism of non-alignment to neoliberalism of 1990s, of post-Cold War globalization, and since 2014, becoming an active actor of multipolarity with a budding romance with the United States. India is no more a follower of Nehruvian romanticism and a champion of non-alignment. India's domestic political scene has shaped its external relations. Since 2014, when Mr. Narendra Modi took over as Prime Minister of India, the country has followed a confrontational approach in its external relations, especially with its neighbors. In the global context, India has been an aspirant to become permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. It pleads that being the second populous country and third largest economy, India deserves to be a part of global power hierarchy. It would be ironic if violator of UN Security Council resolutions may become its permanent member. Since multipolarity instead of multilateralism has become a norm in the international politics, India has positioned itself according to the emerging scenarios. In terms of geostrategic and geoeconomic importance, India has smartly played its cards through trilaterals such as US-Japan-India and Russia-India-China. So it offers them, India, a place at the high table. Similarly, its participation in Brazil, Russia, China, South Africa, i.e. BRICS, and G20 are beneficial to it diplomatically and economically. Being a full dialogue partner with the ASEAN and European Union as well as the African Union, India has access to wider audiences to do business and put its point of view across. Regionally, India has tried to play a hegemon. Being a neighbor of India has certainly been a challenge, not an opportunity. Unfortunately, none of India's neighbors are happy. Invariably, they face problems along their borders in which, as it turns out, India has either grabbed their territory or stakes claims on their territory. For instance, on Hyderabad and Junagadh, India's yardstick was religious while it pleaded for secularism. It was argued that Muslim rulers could not stay independent or join Pakistan when majority were Hindus. However, on Jammu and Kashmir, the instrument of accession became the strong argument for the Indian leaders. But when confronted with the protestations from Pakistan, supported by the international community, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru took the matter to the UN Security Council and pledged to hold a plebiscite under the UN supervision, a promise which successive Indian governments never fulfilled either with the Kashmiri people or Pakistan. Since 2014, India has applied nationalist approach to international relations. It is an elaborate agenda pursued by the Hindutva majoritarian dispensation led by RSS, which has been mentioned by my colleagues. In the neighborhood, this policy has only increased tensions, whether it's illegal annexation of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir on 5th August 2019, which raised tensions with Pakistan as well as with China. Showing Nepalese territory of Kalapani as India's, or enactment of Citizen Amendment Act along with National Registry of Citizens, which caused frictions with Bangladesh, Afghanistan and Pakistan for singling out Muslim migrants of these countries as disqualified to become Indian citizens. India has been very much in the game of balance of power in the region. Its pursuit to be in competition with China on one hand and with Pakistan on the other hand has created a two-front situation with grave consequences, to which Ambassador Riaz Khokhar and Mr. Aziz Khan have already given a detailed account. India has tried to isolate Pakistan at the regional and global level. It boycotted SAARC summit to be held in Pakistan in 2016. However, Pakistan could hold the Eco Summit just to show that Indian tactics to isolate Pakistan would not work. Similarly, it has been playing spoiler's role in Afghan peace process in order to keep Pakistan entangled in a two-front situation. In terms of global competition for power and influence, India opposes CPEC and BRI on flimsy pretexts of Gilgit-Baltistan being disputed territory. However, in doing so, it is aligned with the US to counter China. It has aligned itself in the Indo-Pacific Alliance to counter China and at the strategic level in the Indo-China Sea. It is also a part of Quad, US, Japan, Australia, and India to oppose China on geostrategic issues at the global level. However, recent military standoff with China has shook the Indians to the stark reality that in the game of balance of power, punching beyond one's weight is always harmful. Hopefully, India would also learn the lesson that hegemons in whatever color or persuasion have no room in 21st century, albeit a cooperative mindset has more chances of success. A small example is that you might have seen the picture, Mr. Pompeo and Taliban leader Mullah Baradar. No match, and no match in either way, politically, economically, or militarily. But 19 years of war in Afghanistan with the Taliban, longest war for the Americans in that country. Finally, it is going to be resolved on the negotiating table. So here for Pakistan, there's a lesson that we have to be patient. We have to be patient in a sense that how the Chinese were patient for Macau, for Hong Kong. But the struggle has to be there. And finally, my one-point recommendation would be that there is an intellectual deficit in our narration on Jammu and Kashmir dispute. If you look at the American Indian narrative, you find their books, more than 100 since 1990, and thousands of research articles which have been published on Jammu and Kashmir dispute. And naturally, in the world, whatever is printed, published, gets the reference by other intellectual scholars. So therefore, whatever we may try to do, try to convince the world, unless we come up with this sound research work, I think our narrative would remain weak, despite the fact that we have a very vibrant Pakistani and Kashmiri diaspora elsewhere in the world. I thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Ambassador Durrani, for your thought-provoking discussion. Now I invite the fourth panelist, His Excellency Ambassador Salman Bashir, for his views on the topic. Ambassador Salman Bashir.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम, अस्सलाम वालेकुम। जनाब सेक्रेटरी साहब, मैं आपके और आपके डिपार्टमेंट का शुक्रगुजार हूँ कि आपने मुझे ये मौका दिया कि इस इम्पोर्टेंट मौजू पे कुछ तबसरा कर सकूँ। मेरे कोलीग्स ने बहुत तफसील के साथ इस टॉपिक का तजिया किया है और कहने को तो कुछ और बाकी ज़्यादा नहीं रहता, मगर मैं चाहूँगा कि एक जो सेंस है बददिली की, उसको दूर किया जाए और एक डीपर लेवल पर हिंदुस्तान का जायज़ा लिया जाए। तो इस ज़मन में हमें माजी से कुछ देखकर आगे की तरफ देखना है। जो डायनेमिक्स हैं जिससे हिंदुस्तान या इस खित्ते को जो मुतासर कर रहे हैं, उस डायनेमिक को समझने की ज़रूरत है और इस ज़मन में एकेडमिकली इस डिकोडिंग के टॉपिक को मेरे ख्याल में देखने की भी ज़रूरत है। आखिर डिकोडिंग से मुराद क्या है? किसी मुल्क की फॉरेन पॉलिसी या कोई भी पॉलिसी को समझने के लिए सबसे पहले आपको उस मुल्क की ज़हन का अंदाज़ा लगाना पड़ता है। हिंदुस्तान के केस में हर पाकिस्तानी जानता है कि हिंदुस्तानी स्टेट का ज़हन कैसा है और बारहा उसको उस ज़मन में उन्होंने उसको डेमोन्स्ट्रेट करके भी अपने कंडक्ट से दिखाया है। मगर इसकी वजह क्या है? मेरे ख्याल में तारीखी पस मंज़र में अगर देखा जाए तो हिंदुस्तान एक्चुअली एक मुल्क नहीं है। हम इसको एक स्टेट का दर्जा देते हैं, मगर ये एक्चुअली एक स्टेट नहीं है। ये एक प्रोडक्ट है कॉलोनियल ऑक्यूपेशन, एक्सप्लॉयटेशन और डेप्रेडेशन का, जो 100 से ज़्यादा साल तक बरतानवी समाज ने इस खत्ते में किया। और जाते हुए 1947 में ये कॉलोनियल प्रोडक्ट जो था वो इंडियन नेशनल कांग्रेस को उन्होंने गिफ्ट किया। तारीखी तौर पर ये खत्ता जो है इसमें बहुत सी प्रिंसिपैलिटीज़ थी, फीफडम्स थे, राजे महाराजे थे। उनको बहुत कम दफ़ा किसी कुव्वत ने यकजा किया। ठीक है, मुगल भी रहे, उससे पहले लोधी भी रहे और लोग भी रहे। कोशिश सबने की कि इस खत्ते पे अपना तसल्लुत कायम करें, बट आखिरी जो कोशिश थी वो बरतानी साम्राज्य ने किया और उसका जो प्रोडक्ट था जिसको आज आप कहते हैं इंडियन स्टेट, वो उसका सक्सेसर ये जिसको हिंदुस्तान के नाम से हम जानते हैं वो बना। सो इंडिया ऑफ टुडे वाज बेसिकली a colonial package of British imperialism. In every sense, India of today is a historical aberration. There are about 29 states within the Indian Union. Each has a different ethos, different races, different cultures, different languages. But when we from Pakistan or elsewhere in the world look at India, we look at Narendra Modi, we look at Delhi, the capital, and it does not occur to us
that India is a sum total of a very diverse population. For instance, I have traveled to West Bengal. Manzoor Sahib was with me in that, and we were received by Mamata Banerjee. They had a different view of Pakistan. Similarly, in Bihar, Patna, which the Indians sort of fancied, the Mauryan dynasty, the capital of the Mauryan Empire. Nitish Kumar, the chief minister, had a very, very different view of Pakistan. So what I'm trying to say is there's great diversity. And I think in Pakistan, especially in the policy circle, making circles, we need to look beyond Delhi, beyond the External Affairs Ministry, and beyond the office of the Indian Prime Minister. But if this is true, that India of today, of 1947, was packaged by colonial exploits, therefore it inherited that colonial mindset. To keep this package intact, it has but to continue with the sort of mindset that there has been. So, as Arundhati Roy recently said, the state of India has been at perpetual war. Hyderabad, Junagadh, Goa, Sikkim, Assam, Jammu and Kashmir, against the Mayas, the Naxalites and Sikhs, oppression, persecution of minorities, aggression against China and Pakistan, Bangladesh, interventions in Sri Lanka, Maldives, Nepal and Bhutan. So this is a continuing thing. In fact, as you know, more than 1/3 of the Indian territory is under active insurgencies. Indian Union is fragile. I think this is a point that we need to understand. It is not that powerful. It has conducted itself in a manner, the domineering, the hegemonic, the militaristic aspects in the colonial mode. But the Union itself is not robust, not strong, it's fragile. So to keep the notion of the Union alive, the Indian leaders from the very beginning invented various labels, such as secular democracy. Now, Hindutva, Hindu Rashtra. I see this as desperate attempts to find the right mix, the cement, that will keep the colonial package that I referred to earlier intact. And as Aziz Khan Sahib said, myths and delusions are part of their stratagems. Now, foreign policy abroad for any state is the pursuit of national interests in the external domain, which need to be prioritized and need to have some rationality. But one thing which stands out in the case of India is that foreign policy has largely been a tool of domestic politics. It has always been, and especially for the Modi regime, it is a vote-getting exercise. That is what drives Indian foreign policy. This is one aspect. As I said earlier, if foreign policy is pursuit of national interests, what is India's national interests? India's national interest is not the welfare of the people, of socio-economic advancement of the Indian people, but Indian national interests are defined in terms of what I call Hindu imperialism. A certain primitive tribalism informs the RSS thesis on Hindu revival. Xenophobia, Islamophobia, and narrow nationalism, in my view, will do India no good. It has already cost India its global reputation as a secular democracy, and at home, Modi's policies have led to political polarization and caused social convulsions. The Hindutva experiment is definitely taking India back to the dark ages. Indian economy is failing, and racial and religious strife is increasing exponentially. Fanciful notions of greatness also find a lot of references in India's strategic thinking. Let me briefly quote some reputed Indian strategists and diplomats. For instance, Jaswant Singh, who was the foreign minister one time, in his book Defending India states that India's present political borders do not conform to its strategic frontiers, which include Afghanistan and extend to Myanmar. That's the scope of the strategic objectives definition. And this is repeated even more recently. For instance, an interesting quote from Shyam Saran, who was the Foreign Secretary's book, How India Sees the World. He says, the driving impulse of India's strategic policy is the eventual integration of the Indian subcontinent. This will remain an enduring objective of India's foreign policy. Since independence, the persistent challenge for India is the reconciliation of its security interests, which cover the entire subcontinent, with the reality of a divided polity. And he goes on to say, there are only two ways. One is being powerful enough to impose India's security perspective on other countries in the subcontinent in the manner of Pax Indica, Indian peace. The other is by designing political, economic, cultural, and security policies to create a web of interdependencies. India could take advantage of its size, its asymmetrical strengths vis-a-vis its neighbors to achieve a level of interconnectedness that would render borders irrelevant. And finally, the punchline, Saran says, the idea of making the subcontinent whole again is a powerful driver of India's foreign policy behavior. Now this is former Indian Foreign Secretary, member of the nuclear, chairman of the Nuclear Indian Security Board, etc., reputed scholar, diplomat. His book gives, in very clear terms, the Indian strategic thought, and we need to see it from our perspective. One aspect which comes from this is the Indian obsession with Pakistan, and I think my colleagues, seniors who have served in Delhi, much more experienced, they will agree with me that each and every Indian is obsessed with Pakistan. It's remarkable. But that obsession is not benign. For them, undoing Pakistan is a key strategic objective. India, in its present form, will not reconcile to the existence of Pakistan. The question of peaceful coexistence as equals for us will always be a challenge. This is written in stone. No matter how much you try, roads, avenues of dialogue or whatever, they will not reconcile. In fact, people like Subramaniam Swamy, the one-man party leader which has only one member himself, he appears frequently. More recently also he said something that, we don't fear a two-front war. This will provide us an opportunity to break Pakistan into four. Now, these are people, these are popular opinions which find resonance in the Indian populace. And I believe India will also not let go of its stranglehold over Jammu and Kashmir. A peaceful solution of the Kashmir dispute is improbable. So although we may keep on asking for it, it is not going to happen. Again, indirectly, but coming from Subramaniam Jaishankar, the present External Affairs Minister, he has written a book which goes titled India Way, Strategies for an Uncertain World. He says there are three big burdens that India carries, which has delayed its rise, like China as a big power. The first, he mentions the 1947 partition, says, has reduced the nation demographically and politically. That's one thing that is the biggest obstacle, he says, that it has hindered India's becoming a great power. The second is, of course, he says that the reform process, economic reform, started late, much later than China. And third is that India did not earlier exercise its nuclear option. Another reputed person, one of the luminaries in Indian constellation of strategic thinking, Shiv Shankar Menon, Foreign Secretary, National Security Advisor with Menon. He's done an article for the Brookings recently. Menon is more realistic. He says foreign policy objective should be transformation of India, growth, development, this, that. And then he goes on to say, some in India think that this is too defensive a goal, that it should make it clear that it wishes to be a great power or a superpower. But Menon says, frankly, being a great power will follow, not precede, India's success in building a strong, prosperous, and modern country. And there is not much point being a great power with miserable people. Now, that's, he's from the Congress side, so he's put the knife, to the Modi supporters. The quest for Security Council permanent membership, the nuclear suppliers group, are well known, aspirations, albeit unsuccessful so far. Now, I think the previous speakers mentioned this thing about non-alignment and, alignment and India's fascination with this concept of strategic autonomy, which has been put to the test in the wake of the changes in the global environment. I think this question is, under Modi, being sort of more or less settled. Indian inclination for a multipolar world seems diminishing. They were the champions of multipolarity, Brazil, South Africa, India, etc. This multipolarity, at least it appears to me, is now, their interest is diminishing as China shoots to prominence and the world probably gets eventually reconciled with the China-US bipolarity. So therefore, it appears that Modi, India has joined the US camp to contain China. Taking sides in the global power play will bring to South Asia a Cold War type of divisions. We, Pakistan, have noted that the Chinese actions along the line of actual control and in Ladakh were significant, were appropriate and timely. China has given India a clear warning against committing strategic blunders. There are some people in India, very few unfortunately, because there is a very heavy clampdown on the Indian media and people are no longer able, in fact they were never able to, but even now, not able to express themselves. But there are Indians who are rational and who think that what Modi is doing is not good for India. They feel that India is in danger of being reduced to a mere agglomeration of narrowly conceived communities and closed minds, hostile to each other and stifling to their own lot. How Indians relate to one another influences how countries handle interstate relations. A shrinking vision at home cannot sustain an expansive vision abroad. I will just, in the context of Indian foreign policy, mention the model of Kautilya, Arthashastra. In their conduct, they are still very much guided by those principles given out by Kautilya and Gandhaki back in 3rd century BC. That's the art of governance, etc. I would like to conclude by saying that Modi's lasting gift to India will be the weakening of the Indian Union. India is more isolated today within the region than it ever was. Political polarization, economic collapse, social convulsions have knocked down the foundations of India's grandiose vision of itself in the world. And what are the lessons? I believe one is that India cannot graduate beyond South Asia unless it learns to respect its neighbors. And I'm confident that Pakistan will continue to hold India to an equation of equals. I thank you.
Thank you very much, His Excellency Salman Bashir, for a very informative and enlightening talk. Ladies and gentlemen, now we have 30 minutes for our Q&A session, and we are opening the floor for Q&A. Now I request the participants who are interested in asking questions to please raise their hands. We'll try to accommodate as many as questions as we can within the given time, and let us move for the first question. That number one, row number one, Mr. Please, please. Please introduce yourself and be brief.
Extra their views about Kashmir. And in the first time in I don't know the subject here, which is technology, the president of Azad Kashmir said at that time that don't wait for the war has already begun. And today two members of this panel, they have also indicated the same thing, that we have to help Kashmiri people. What kind of help do you think that sometimes should or could extend to India, so that the Kashmiris in India are occupied Kashmir?
Thank you. Mr. Salman Bashir.
Can you name one country in the world that got its freedom on its own? I don't think you will be able to do that. Those who know how to support this, I don't think I have to elaborate. There are ways and ways of supporting improvement. Kashmiris have fought for the last 70 years, given a lot of blood and a lot of treasure. Now, mere statements, I said this and I'm very frank about it, is not going to be helpful. We normally say Pakistan fully supports Kashmir politically and morally and legally and diplomatically. This sentence does not inspire much hope in Kashmir. So let me just replace it by saying we should give them full spectrum support. Now, I leave it to your imagination. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Please introduce yourself, sir. Sir, please check your mic. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Sir, my question is that you spoke on the transparency of the Indian foreign policy. I agree with you partially with that. But some people believe at the same time that Indian policy is changing. For example, in Kashmir, for 70 years, India was considering Kashmir is territory. But all of a sudden, this Kashmir became a integral part of India according to their statements. So what's your opinion?
Sir, Ambassador.
The question is for Riaz.
Well, thank you for, as I understood the question that, while Kashmir was considered as a dispute previously by India, since last year, 5 August, when they incorporated Kashmir as a union territory, so what is Pakistan's view on that? Well, I think, first of all, this action by the Indians has been rejected by the Kashmiri people who won and all. And as was said by my colleagues, even those Indian parties and individuals who were pro-India have not accepted the dissolution of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. That's number one. Number two, I think, as was said earlier, all the agreements which were bilateral, like the Simla agreement, have been rendered ineffective by this action, Indian action. 3, this action by India has created not only tremendous alienation on the part of the people of Jammu and Kashmir against India, but also created problems for China. Ladakh region, which has seen some activity, military activity between China and India, is part of the greater Jammu and Kashmir region. And Indian expansionist hegemonic mindset, when they claim the Chinese territory of Hussain as theirs, triggered the sequence of events that we have seen since May, June of this year. So China has asserted itself also, has been hurt by these actions, and has asserted itself, in fact, in the greater, if you look at the Jammu and Kashmir question in the larger sense, China also becomes a party. So in fact, there are now 4 parties. First of all, primarily the Kashmiris, then Pakistan and India, and China is also interested in this. So I believe that what the Indians have done is irrational and carries very far-reaching consequences. In my personal view, this may not go well for India in the long run.
Any question from this side, please? Yeah. Javed Siddiq, sir.
Javed Siddiq from Nawaiba. This narrative is gaining ground with our policymakers, politicians, that India is a big country, has a big economy, and the world is more interested to build its relations with India. And they are tilted towards India. By that, it means that they are interested to have better relationship with India. In the context of the issue of Kashmir, we want the world community, the United Nations, to help us get these Kashmiris the right of self-determination. And if this narrative is real, that India is too big a country that is more influential, that it has global influence, and we cannot help out Kashmir in achieving the right of self-determination. How do you reconcile these two ideas?
Can we refer this question to Mr. Durrani? Mr. Durrani, please.
Thank you, Judge Sir. I think when we talk about the UN's role or what they can do, I think they can't do anything about countries like India and Pakistan. Their role has been confined to small countries, African countries, Burundi, Rwanda, Liberia. So in that aspect, and secondly, we shouldn't forget the kind of divide which UN system faces. It is not the question of General Assembly where you can bring in a resolution and it is passed, but hardly implemented. With regard to the UN Security Council, it is a divided house. You have just seen 3 informal sessions held on Kashmir, but those are informal sessions. They have no official value. Yes, they have political value, you can, but they could not come up with a decision. Reason being that while Russia was silent, China was supportive, it initiated 2 initiatives. France, because they were selling their Rafale aircraft to the Indians, so they opposed. So if one single permanent member out of 5, they oppose it, so it is veto in that aspect. One is that. And secondly, when you talk about this narrative, I said at the outset that unfortunately, intellectually, we have to do more. As I said, since for the past 30 years when this movement got more momentum, otherwise Kashmiris were struggling for the past 7 decades. In the past 3 decades, I have gone through almost more than 100 titles publishing in India. But what is the situation in Pakistan? You can count on your fingers of the 2 hands. That's the reality. In terms of research papers, hardly you can find research papers on that. As to compare it with India, it is the ratio between 1:100. So that's the situation. So in that respect, yes, but at the same time, the issue is that India could not gain the legitimacy. That is the issue. Because if war is an option, but should we go for that war? I think ultimately it comes to shove, so yes, which is possible. But should the 2 nuclear powers go for war? And where would be the threshold? What would be the threshold? Thank you.
So let me just add one or 2 points. East Timor became independent because they were Christians. South Sudan became independent because they were also Christians. Palestinians are overwhelmingly Muslims, and Kashmiris are overwhelmingly Muslims. So you can understand how the international community looks at these issues. And there is no such thing as international conscience, by the way. There is no such thing as morality. After all, this problem was created by the United Kingdom. And initially, the United States perhaps was not entirely in line with what the UK did, but by and large, over the years, and because of changing international realities, things have become far more difficult. Now, Kashmiri cause, morally, politically, legally, from the humanitarian point of view, is probably one of the strongest cases, just like the Palestinian issue. But why is there no international support? Because there is no conscience. So what matters is interest, economic interest, strategic interest, and of course, what these major countries want.
Kashmiris were Muslims, Christians, you would have been sure that they would have been free by now. That's the dirty reality of international politics.
Please, next question. Please. Please, sir, check your mic, please, sir. Yes.
My name is Asif. I'm a freelance journalist and columnist. Mr. Riaz Khokhar, while delivering his discourse, said that the time has come for Pakistan to give all-out help to the Kashmiris. My question to him is, do you think it will not be a risky proposition for Pakistan, considering the fact that the international community after 9/11 does not recognize the struggle in Kashmir as a freedom struggle?
Thank you, sir. Sir, Mr. Aziz Khan, please.
ये बात ये है कि पाकिस्तान एक आज़ाद मुल्क है and every Pakistani leader has been on record saying that Kashmir is a very fundamental issue और हर कायद-ए-आज़म को अगर वोट करें तो it is the lifeline of Pakistan. मगर क्या किया? But हमारी क्या पॉलिसी है? LOC पे फायरिंग होती है, यूनियन हाई कमिश्नर को बुलाते हैं, उसको एक कागज दे देते हैं और यहाँ से दिल्ली से कहा जाता है कि मुंह तोड़ जवाब देंगे, चले जी हो गया ठीक. But that's not enough. If you want the Kashmiris to become independent, you have to support them. I don't have to spell out in an audience like this what kind of support is required. And it is not illegal under international law. It's not illegal under the UN Charter. And that this is not terrorism. Providing support to people who are fighting for their freedom is not terrorism. आप UN Charter को पढ़ लें, आपको बिल्कुल पता चल जाएगा कि क्या है क्या. हिम्मत की जरूरत है, इस मुल्क को हिम्मत की जरूरत है. I'm sorry to say that this country, the elite has failed the country. आपकी elite पे हिम्मत नहीं. अगर आप common man से पूछें, वो he feels rather strongly about it. पाकिस्तान के सैकड़ों villages हैं जहाँ पर लोग दफन हुए हैं इसी वजह से. So it's a question of रिस्क तो लेना पड़ता है, बगैर रिस्क के जिंदगी में कोई फायदा नहीं है. जी,
थैंक यू सर. थैंक यू सर.
मेरा कहने का मतलब था कि आप कहते हैं कि हमें उनको मिलिट्री सपोर्ट भी देनी चाहिए. दिस इज व्हाट यू मीन एक्चुअली. तो इस हालात में जब दुनिया जो है वो उसको स्ट्रगल फ्रीडम स्ट्रगल मान ही नहीं रही. ठीक है, यूएन के रेजोल्यूशन कहते हैं कि आप उनको स्ट्रगल को सपोर्ट कर सकते हैं. ये तो किताबी बातें हैं, लेकिन प्रैक्टिकली क्या आप समझते हैं कि पाकिस्तान इस वक्त इस पोजीशन में है कि वो इस किस्म की सपोर्ट उनको दे और उसके ऊपर कोई कुछ दलाल नहीं आएगी?
थैंक यू सर. थैंक यू सर. थैंक यू सर.
देखिए बात ये है, ये this is not a question that I as a senior citizen or somebody who is now retired can answer this question. But if we say that we are a powerful country, and if you believe in a cause, either you believe in a cause or you don't. But it doesn't mean that we should allow another 50,000 or 100,000 Kashmiris to die. फिर आप ये कहना छोड़ दीजिए कि कश्मीरी हमारे लिए ना लड़े. उनको कह दीजिए कि आपने जो फैसला करवाना है आप हिंदुस्तान के साथ बैठ कर कर लें. बट आप इस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से देखिए कि यूएन रेजोल्यूशंस में पाकिस्तान, इंडिया, कश्मीर, इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी, these are 4 parties और इन्होंने भी जिक्र किया कि चीन भी अब पार्टी. तो मकसद ये है कि क्या हम ये छोड़ दें, क्या हम कश्मीरियों को कहें भाई खुदा हाफिज, यू आर ऑन योर ओन, डू यू वांट टू से दिस? या तो कह दें, या तो आप कह दें ताकि वो बेचारे और मार ना खाएं। जितनी मार उन्होंने खाई है, जितनी मार उन्होंने पाकिस्तान के लिए खाई है, तो हमें तो ये इस चीज के बारे में सोचना चाहिए। मैं ये नहीं कह रहा कि कल आप लड़ाई कर देना, आप न्यूक्लियर बॉम्ब फेंक दें, ये कर दें, मगर देयर आर वेज एंड वेज ऑफ सपोर्टिंग ए मूवमेंट। आप सपोर्ट नहीं करेंगे और हजारों कश्मीरी करेंगे। So this is my point. I do not accept your argument that the international community thinks that this is terrorism. It is not terrorism. This is exactly what we have to do. We have to persuade the world. कि जो हमको भी नजर आ रहा है और न्यूयॉर्क टाइम्स लिख रहा है, वॉशिंगटन पोस्ट लिख रहा है, गार्डियन लिख रहा है, every major Western newspaper is writing कि भाई ये लोगों के साथ बहुत ज्यादती हो रही है और ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेशन and they are unanimously saying that the people of Jammu and Kashmir want freedom from India. 70 साल में they have not been able to convert other than a few odd people like the Farooq Abdullah and the Umar Abdullah and so main चीज ये है कि हिंदुस्तान में कश्मीर में तकरीबन 100% एलिमिनेशन है। हमें इस चीज को रिस्पेक्ट करनी चाहिए। ये कह देना कि हम रिस्क नहीं ले सकते, तो आपने फिर किस लिए इतनी बड़ी फौज बनाई?
Thank you so much, sir.
इसलिए आपने
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, please. We have, sir, please, sir. Excuse me, sir, please. Right, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Now, let us move to another question, please. I will encourage the young officers to please raise and grab the opportunity, please.
Again, Chief Al-Jazeera TV. Sir, India supported morally and materially by Israel and by US. Some people believe that it put Pakistan in defensive position. How far this assumption is correct? And the other thing, you said that statements cannot affect the Indian position on Kashmir. If the statements cannot do, and seminars cannot do, and war, everyone knows that it is very difficult. And the human rights, they are killing, mom to be suffering with Kashmir. What is the solution, or what is your suggestions, Mr. Riaz?
I could hear you clearly, sir.
Let me try to answer your question and add on to it. You see, there are times when, and particularly in today's modern world, the relations are a little more complicated and interdependent. But at the same time, the just struggles survive. It may take longer, but I have no doubt in my mind that ultimately, for example, in the question of Palestine, they will have to concede and they will have to agree to the creation of a Palestinian state as it was put in the UN resolutions. Just give you an example. When Pakistan's struggle was launched, initially the idea of Pakistan, nobody, people used to scoff at that. People used to say it is impossible to create Pakistan. And without firing a shot, ultimately, through negotiations, through talks, through political struggle, not a military struggle, but through a political struggle, finally Pakistan came into being. I don't see why Kashmiris will not get their right. Maybe a little difficulty, maybe a little time consuming. When we talk about giving full support, the full support can be channeled in many ways. But in today's world, the main thing is that the support has to be political, diplomatic. And at the same time, strengthening and giving help to the Kashmiris so that they are able to continue their struggle and that they are not crushed and cowed down by the Indian oppression. And now today, as Riaz also mentioned, that all the major newspapers in the world who never spoke about Kashmir at one time, today they are talking about oppression in Kashmir. that as we continue giving this kind of support, and that is why I mentioned that media from here also can play a very important role in that we should continue to plead the cause of Kashmiri people. Ultimately, there may be difficulties, but ultimately the world conscience, which at the moment is more mercantile than based on principles, may finally accept the reality. And I can assure you that whatever little experience I have had of interacting with the Kashmiri people, they are determined to carry on. And about that we should have worked out. And as I mentioned, that today the situation is this, where even those Kashmiri parties which should have considered pro-India parties are talking against it. So these are certain blunders that the Indian government has made and have created an opportunity where I think the Kashmiri cause will receive strength and Kashmiri struggle will receive strength rather than setback.
I think a number of questions have been asked on Kashmir that reflects that Kashmir lives in hearts and minds of Pakistan. So this is the fact. Please, now we are going to turn to Mr. Syed for two question, please.
A lot of questions have been asked on Kashmir.
Speak into the mic, please.
Please check your mic.
So once Heavy Kissinger has mentioned that Europe has seen its best 3 centuries, and now power politics is being shifted from Western to Shattered Pacific. And we have witnessed that in the Shattered Pacific, India has become the most favored baby of the powerful nations in order to contain the China. So, and again we have witnessed the belligerence of India and its attitudes. It's not paying any heed to the international warnings and continuing human rights violations, sheer violations in Kashmir. And it's not paying any heed to United Nations and its Security Council's resolutions. Sir, in this changing scenario, drastically changing scenario, being foreign policy experts, and what kind of changes or additions you will suggest in our foreign policy to make it more robust in this changing scenario, this paradigm shift, so that we could become more relevant in this changing scenario?
Sir, Ambassador Salman Bashir, please.
I think it's a very interesting question, and I will give you my perspective. I don't ask you to agree with me, but there have been questions like from Al Jazeera, yourself, sir, about the changing scenario, the support Israel and the US is giving to India. So what happens to Kashmir and what happens to Pakistan? But I think in this whole analysis, as you see, it unfolds week by week, if not day to day, in the world and in the region, you should not miss the point that Pakistan is gaining strength because of our geo-economic, geo-strategic location. India set out to isolate Pakistan. This was declared Indian policy by Modi and his government. The fact is that today India is isolated within the region. Its relations with Bangladesh have gone wrong. Sri Lanka, Maldives, despite a friendly government, the people of Maldives think differently. Nepal, as was said, a Hindu state, is now standing up to Indian diktat. Bhutan is trying to pry open new perspectives. The game changer in this respect, the development or the shift, what you said, Kissinger saying, pivot to Asia and about the Asian century. Who is behind it? It is China. China is Pakistan's most trusted friend and has always been a reliable guarantee and supporter for Pakistan's security and development. CPEC is the first big project in the context of the Belt and Road. We are seeing takers for the CPAC concept, the BRI concept in our region. So I think avenues are opening for Pakistan if it's a big if, but if things improve slightly within Afghanistan, we'll have more connectivity. If we are smart, we should focus more on Iran and Turkey and also open up to the Gulf. As I see it, there are opportunities coming our way. Now, what is India doing? It is one, it is claustrophobic. It is sort of closeted itself. It is no longer respected and no longer really looked up in the region, even by small countries like Nepal, who are also opening up to China. Bangladesh is opening up to China. So Indians have been saying that their policy is to look and act east, Asia Pacific. They have sent some warships, Indian naval ships, to the South China Sea. What business does India have in the territorial maritime zones of China? So I think the Chinese are smart. They have sent a very, very strong but simple message: refrain from committing strategic blunders. When the Indians got the beating in Ladakh, not one statement came out from India's friends in the West, Europe, or the US, and from Israel. Did they support India against China? No. So, as I say, it's important that we in Pakistan start to view these things a bit more clearly and not with the sort of dumb, half prisms that we had previously where we were weak. I think Pakistan is strong today, will grow stronger. We are well situated, and it is India that is going to stifle itself, one in the region, and then the whole thesis of my talk was the weakness, the weakening of the Indian Union, the foundations of the Union. If you look at the Indian economy, sharp decline. All this fancy about rise and shine is gone, evaporated. Look at the calamity that COVID is wreaking on the Indian people. Number 2 in the world in terms of COVID deaths and infections. Look at the number of unemployed, even official figures, astounding. So I think there is hope, there is scope for Pakistan. And the world is going to come to realize that. In any case, the world is in trouble. Every country, every region is in trouble. So we should not lament too much. Those who think that we need international support, we don't need international support. So far we have the support of our closest friends like China, I think, which is material, which is political. That is all that is required. And the priority has to be right. The priority is economic and social development of Pakistan. If that is the priority. And in the context of Kashmir, I mean, there were these questions about what sort of support to the Kashmiris. Even as High Commissioner to India in Delhi, I have said that what you really need to do is to support the civil society movements in Kashmir, the lawyers, the teachers, the students, the doctors. It is going to be a long struggle, and that support will be made available to them by the Kashmiri diaspora, and nobody can object to that support. We need to strengthen the Kashmiri civil society for a long but successful struggle. And in the meanwhile, what is happening in the Northeast? Are we aware? Does our media have enough focus on the problems that are happening in the northeastern states of India? Are there not active insurgencies there? Is the Indian army not tied up all along the LAC and in the northeast? So I think let's not underestimate the positives also in the situation, which otherwise looks rather dismal.
Thank you, sir. Let us move to Maroh, please.
I'm of Clay, and I'm working with the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. First of all, I'd like to thank all the distinguished panelists for providing such valuable insights on the topic. So the answer to my question might be repetitive, however, I'm going to ask it. Since today's topic also touches the regional and global aspects of the Indian foreign policy, I'd like to ask that how far China can be successful in deterring India to pursue its aggressive and hegemonic designs, especially after it's been implied that US would want to contain China in the region. Also, China has an immense economic clout, both regionally and internationally, so it has a great onus on it, owing to its position in the region. So, your comments on it. Thank you.
In one sentence, you saw what happened to Indian hegemonic designs in Ladakh recently, what China did to that. So China is not going to allow India any hegemonic design. At the same time, China is a old civilization, a very wise civilization. They would make sure that things don't go out of hand, but at the same time, they'll act firmly. There is no question. Hegemony, in fact, the word hegemony, I personally am allergic to the word hegemony for the simple reason that if the US could not exert its hegemony on a tiny country like Cuba, then no country can exert its hegemony on others unless that country accepts that hegemony. If Pakistan doesn't accept the hegemony, India cannot exert that. China is a very vast, large country, economically much more powerful than India, technologically much more powerful than advanced than India, militarily much more powerful than India. European ideas of hegemony vis-a-vis China is more Bollywood than reality.
We'll pick only one question, please. We have just one final question.
Last question.
Last question. So should we go to our colleague here? Please check your mic.
My name is Sirekha, and I'm an information officer working with the Ministry of Information. Thank you, sir, for your deep insight into such an important topic. Sir, one of the speakers mentioned that foreign policy is the extension of domestic policy. If we see the Indian Constitution, it provides, it calls it secular and democratic, one of the best democracy in the world. Whereas the Bharatiya Janata Party, before coming to the election, showed its hegemonic designs and actions, and it won the election with a majority. After that, we can see that it started showing within the India its designs, aggressive design in form of the Citizen Amendment Act, and protests started within the India. So my question is that is it the Indian government or the India as a state that is prohibiting the world community to take the practical steps to stop it from its aggressive design? Because the other world community and the countries, they also support the democracy and calls the claims to be the protector of the human rights.
Thank you, Zilema. Sir.
India is supposed to be the largest democracy in the world, and yet it is afraid of one of the basic principles of democracy, the right of self-determination. उनमें हिम्मत नहीं है कि वो कश्मीरियों को ये राइट दे दे. Number one. Secondly, as I said in my remarks also, मोदी ने जो कुछ भी किया है वो इंडियन पॉपुलेशन के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से पॉपुलर चीज है. सेकेंडली, थर्डली, वो एक राम मंदिर बना रहा है. I was in India when the Babri Masjid was demolished. It was very painful for the Muslims of India. अब वो मंदिर बना रहा है. ये 3-4 साल में बनेगा. उस मंदिर के बेसिस के ऊपर वो इलेक्शन फिर होंगे. कोई कांग्रेस, कोई इंडियन पार्टी, कोई इंडियन पॉलिटिकल पार्टी जो इसने काम किए हैं वो इन चीजों को रिवर्स नहीं कर सकते, क्योंकि उनकी जनता नहीं मानेगी, हिंदुस्तान के लोग नहीं मानेंगे। वो समझते इसने बहुत बड़ा काम कर दिया। और मैं आपको ये भी बता दूं कि पॉलिटिकल पार्टी जो हिंदुस्तान में है वो दिन में खुश हैं कि भाई जो गंदा काम था वो इसने कर दिया, तो आप हम कुछ भी नहीं कर सकते। When a major policy thing is decided or taken or action is taken, उसको रिवर्स करना बड़ा मुश्किल होता है। And I don't see any major political party in India at the moment standing up to Modi. ये मसला है हिंदुस्तान में। डेमोक्रेसी जैसी भी है वहाँ दूरी लकड़ी जो भी है ठीक उनका तो थोड़ी बहुत चल रही है, but he is a very vicious man. Lynching of a Muslim is a popular thing. अब बताइए कि दुनिया में कहाँ where would anybody accept lynching? यानी गाय के बारे में जो उनके लॉज हैं और जो उनके स्टेटमेंट हैं, आप उनको जरा गौर से पढ़ें, ये एक नई सोच है वहां। एंड दिस इज बाय द वे द रियल इंडिया, दिस इज द रियल इंडिया। अब आप मुसलमानों से वहां पूछें कि उनकी क्या हालत। अब उन्होंने उनकी, आपको पता ना भाई बीजेपी की और आरएसएस वालों की एक और वो पॉलिसी है, घर वापसी की बात कर रहे हैं कि जो मुसलमान हैं, जो सिख हैं, जो क्रिश्चियन हैं, वो ठीक है मगर आप वापस आ जाए। So you see, it is a very vicious thing, and the world doesn't care. The world doesn't care. Their interest is कि हमारे आर्म्स खरीद ले, हमारी चीजें खरीद ले और हमारे साथ ट्रेड बढ़ा ले, ये चीजें, these are the interests. Containment of China is nonsense. No country can be contained, and China is too big to be contained. And we should be very clear in our views. We must be totally supportive of China. India is in illegal occupation of Kashmir, illegal occupation of Nepalese territory, illegal occupation of Chinese territory. And they must vacate this. और इंडिया, ये आप उनके टेलीविजन को देखें ना, वो बात करते हैं टू फ्रंट वॉर और 2.5 फ्रंट वॉर। ओ भाई, for God's sake, it's beyond them. वो डिपेंड कर रहे हैं कि अमेरिका उनको सपोर्ट करे, अमेरिका उनको हथियार देगा। वो ठीक है, हो सकता है हथियार देगा, मगर डू यू सी एन अमेरिकन एक्चुअली फाइटिंग for India along the LAC area? No way. So I think we must understand, and I think somebody talked about, देखिए, if you are politically cohesive, 3 points I want to make: politically cohesive, economically strong, militarily strong, वाइब्रेंट सोसाइटी, तो आपको कोई हाथ नहीं लगा सकता। आप ये अपने सवाल अपने आप को पूछे कि ये तीनों सवालों में आप कितने मार्क्स लेंगे अपने आप। That is the key to the whole thing. If Pakistan was politically strong, economically strong, militarily strong, you're a nuclear power, nobody can touch you. अगर ये ना होता तो अब तक हिंदुस्तानी बहुत कुछ कर जाते। देखिए, वो बात नहीं आ रही किसी चीज से, चाहे वो बलूचिस्तान हो, चाहे वो पाटा हो, चाहे वो रूरल सिंध हो, वो ओपनली कहते हैं कि वी आर कैरिड द वॉर टू पाकिस्तान। सो दिस इज अ गेम टू प्ले, बाय द वे, दिस इज एन एक्सप्रेशन, दिस इज अ गेम टू प्ले। हमारे में नेशनल हिम्मत है या नहीं है, ये बुनियादी बात। थैंक यू।
Thank you so much, sir. Before we wind up the discussion, let me summarize the main points that were discussed today. The panel has identified the dynamics and factors like Hindutva, hegemonic designs, their local politics, which impel the Indian foreign policy. There was a complete...
Forgive me, I have to get some there.
Sir, we have to give just one minute, please. There was a complete sense of agreement on the following. India is a threat to regional and global peace. India's conduct is terribly worrisome for the region and beyond. India is incapable of earning trust among the neighboring countries, and the panel has strongly condemned the illegal Indian Act of 5th August 2019, where after the revocation of 370, the follow-up administrative and political actions causing demographic, socio-economic, cultural and political insecurity and marginalization of local Kashmiris in the Indian illegal occupied Jammu and Kashmir was also strongly condemned by the panelists. May I request you to kindly give a big round of applause for our panelists. Now I request Principal Information Officer, Ms. Shahira Shahid, for a vote of thanks.
Assalamu alaikum ji, Secretary Sahab and our distinguished guests here. I have been given the task to formally thank you. We are very grateful, sir, to you for taking out so much time and discussing a very important issue, an issue which really needs to be discussed a lot. And our aim here was to create a discussion, and this discussion hopefully will clear the impressions that our young officers have, and they can then take it along from here. We have our distinguished journalists, foreign as well as local, and so we are hoping that from here this will be taken to the public and a good public opinion dialogue will be created. We are very grateful, sir, once again for your presence here today. Thank you.
I now request Secretary Information and Broadcasting, Mr. Akbar Durrani, to please come forward and present souvenirs to the worthy panelists.
Sir, please. Thank you very much, sir.
Ambassador Riaz Hussain, Khokhar. Ambassador Salman, Bashir. Ambassador His Excellency Aziz Khan. Ambassador Asif Durrani. I thank you all for your time and cooperation. Please proceed for the refreshments. Thank you very much.